Hello, today I'm actually not going to talk about any issues that relate to gold or silver because every now and then I think it's really important just to talk about life in general. So I want to let you know about a great little place that I visited in Laos, in the capital of Vientiane. So I just came back from Laos and I went to this place called Cope, and what it is, it's a visitor rehabilitation center for people that have been severely injured or have lost a limb due to what they call UXO, which is unexploded ordnances left over from the Vietnam War. So here are just some crazy facts because I took a photo of one of these stats sheets that were hanging up in this museum, and because the rehabilitation center also has a part that has a museum, and you can watch documentaries about how these landmines are really hurting the Lao economy, hurting the ability of Lao people to subsist, why it's causing food insecurity, because if you can imagine, if you don't know if your fields are littered with bomblets or cluster bombs or other unexploded ordnances, then you can't really farm because of fear of losing a limb or even worse, dying. So here are just some of the stats. First of all, I didn't actually even know Laos was the most heavily bombed country in any war in history per capita. So that actually was a stat that I was unaware of. And during the time that Laos was bombed during the Vietnam War from 1964 to 1973, over 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on Laos. That is crazy. So there are over 580,000 separate bombing missions that affected Laos. So during the time that Laos was being bombed, that amounts to, on average, a bombing mission once every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 straight years. That is a crazy, crazy stat. Let's see some of the other stats. Let's see, there are over 270 million bomblets that were dropped onto Laos, and up to 30% failed to detonate. So after the war ended, that meant there were about 80 million unexploded bomblets that remained throughout Laos. Approximately 25% of all villages in the entire country, Laos, are still contaminated today with unexploded ordnances. All 17 provinces of Laos suffer from UXO contamination. 41 out of the 46 poorest districts suffered from UXO contamination. And more than 50,000 people were killed as a result of all these bombs that are dropped on Laos during the Vietnam War that remain unexploded. And of those 50,000 people, 13,500 lost a limb, 40% were children. And today, approximately 100 new casualties will still occur every single year. So that is a crazy, crazy stat. Now I'm going to insert some photos as well that I took at the museum so you can just realize how devastating a problem this is. And I'll explain some of the photos that I'm going to insert in just a second. You'll see one photo that has a field that is marked by, you'll see bright red poles, and that is basically everywhere where unexploded ordnance has been found. So what they need to do once they identify those areas is go back, wire those bombs or bomblets that they discover, and then blow them up so no child or no adult will be harmed. Okay, let's take a look at some of those photos now. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit more about those pictures that I just showed you because some of those pictures were just so, what's the word I'm looking for? Just so disturbing. Like, I don't know if you could really see some of those drawings, but some of those drawings I showed you were drawn by teenagers after the U.S. dropped bombs on Lao villages. And in one of those drawings, there were body parts all over the places, just like a human head, decapitated from shrapnel from an exploding bomblet or something, from a cluster bomb. And there are hands and feet just strewn all over the ground. And these are actually drawings that 18 or 19-year-old kids drew during, like, in the aftermath of that war. So this is something that I really, really want people to consider, because war has been sanitized today, where people do not see the horrors of war. All they see, they don't, you know, we have a president in the United States, Barack Obama, who talks about how horrific chemical warfare is, and certainly chemical warfare is horrific, but yet he doesn't condemn other countries, including Britain, Israel, that use white phosphorus, which basically incinerates people alive. The U.S. themselves have been in wars where they use chemical warfare all the time, like napalm. What is napalm? Where we basically just incinerated villages in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. So let me read you. This is one book I'm going to talk about in future videos too, called War is a Racket. And it's written by very, very famous, high-ranking, highly decorated Brigadier General of the U.S. Army named Smedley Butler. And he wrote this book in the 1930s, incredibly, and he turned against the establishment, meaning the banking military-industrial complex, when he learned that he was just being used as a pawn to basically, he said every war was for profit. There was monetary reasons for almost every war, and it wasn't for the official reasons governments were selling it to the people. So this is what he wrote in this book called War is a Racket, which I highly recommend anyone read. He said, quote unquote, "I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys," which National City Bank, for those of you that know the banking history, basically evolved to become Citibank, to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefits of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic and for American sugar interests in 1916. In China, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went its way unmolested, quote unquote. So when you think about it today, you had General Wesley Clark. After 9/11, he said he saw a memo in which the U.S. was going to invade 7 countries in 5 years, which has almost been pulled off by you know, the day I speak of today, which is crazy because this is right after 9/11 happened. In fact, for those of you that haven't seen it, since that clip is really, really short, it's only 2 minutes, let me just play you that clip from General Wesley Clark right now so you can listen to it on your own.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
And so
think about what those 7 countries have in common. The 7 countries have in common is that they are not members of the Central Bank of Central Banks, which is the Bank of International Settlements. So just go to the website, which I believe is www.bis.org, and you'll see none of those 7 countries are on that list. So bankers have always waged war to basically control monetary supplies in a nation. So in this case, I have heard, I believe it was U.S. Governor Jesse Ventura said that certain oil interests want to buy a pipeline through Syria, and the current President Assad is not friendly to those interests. So that is why they're making up these bogus accusations that even that Russian President Putin said are untrue, that Russian intelligence sources have shown it was the rebels that deployed chemical weapons in Syria, not President Assad. So this is why the West is making up stories, again, for banking interests, for monetary interests to get in there. So, you know, even throughout history, Southeast Asia, you look, one of the only countries in Southeast Asia that's a member of the Bank for International Settlements, the Central Bank of Central Banks, is Thailand. Thailand has never been invaded by the U.S. But what other countries are not members of the BIS? Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, all that have been bombed by the U.S. military. So there's definite connection to banks and to bombing. So you must, instead of just, you know, because war has been so sanitized and a lot of people hear about war, you still get this very infantile, not even high school mentality. It's more like a 3rd grade mentality of let's bomb the hell out of them to show us how bad we are. But yet, no one thinks about the real consequences of war, the real devastation it still has. And I've seen that by watching these videos at the Cope Rehabilitation Center in Vientiane, that still today people are having limbs severed, are losing eyes from exploding bomblets from cluster bombs. They're still laying in the ground in Laos, and that is just tragic. That is just a travesty. And the countries that basically are responsible for this don't even spend money to clean it up. So, you know, before you have this raw mentality, please connect the dots and be a little more compassionate about war, because war should always be a last resort. It should never be the first. And if it's the first thing that certain leaders are thinking of, you got to start digging. What are the ulterior motives here? Who are the true financiers of this war, and what do they wish to accomplish? Okay, let's return back to my discussion about what I learned about the tragic, terrible consequences of those 580,000 separate bombing missions that occurred over Laos during the Vietnam War.
I watched a documentary when I was there, and there were people that said whenever they walked outside of their home that they would see a bomb 2 to 3 meters. They would walk another 2 to 3 meters, see another bomb. They would walk another 2 to 3 meters and see another bomb. And you have to understand that all these are live bombs, so it's just an insane situation. And so they say that they're still making efforts to clear all areas of unexploded ordnance, but that just 1 hectare, which is only a 100 square meter area, can take as long as 10 days to clear. It's a very painstaking job where they basically just walk through fields with metal detectors to try to find bombs that are still buried in the earth, or, you know, and if the area, the hectare, is hilly, or if it's rugged, if there's heavy vegetation, it can even take longer than 10 days. So you can imagine how painstaking a process this is. And then actually how dangerous a process it is as well. So Cope is a wonderful place. They actually have employees that help to give people prosthetics that have lost limbs, that have, you know, been amputated and lost an arm or a leg due to being involved in some kind of tragic explosion. And actually, a lot of the poor people now, they just have what is a cooking area that they just dig in the dirt, and they put charcoal and they build a fire to cook their food. But the problem is, if there's still live ordnance buried in the ground, then the heat will actually activate it. And there have actually been a number of people that have lost limbs, lost eyes, and died from cooking, because they had no idea that bombs are underneath the ground where they live. So COPE is a wonderful organization. They actually give prosthetics, which is actually very cheap. It's only $75 to fit an amputee with a prosthetic. So I highly recommend that you check out their website. Their website is www.copelaos.org, and that's spelled COPELAOS.org. And you can even write them for more information. Their email address is cope@laopdr.com. So cope@laopdr.com. And I'll put all the information in the video description below, so you can also check it out. And if you want to get a free book for your donation, because what I'm going to do is I've decided, actually, since the people at this organization are wonderful, I am actually going to add them to the list of organizations that I'm going to donate all the proceeds from the sale of the Golden Gift, at least to the end of this year, and probably continue it next year as well, to COPE. So you can go to our website at www.smartknowledgeu.com. On the front page, you'll see a Books for Charity link, and you can buy our latest book, which is The Golden Gift, which basically explains why the whole world is having a global monetary crisis and what you need to do to protect yourself. And if you buy that book, it's available on Kindle, it's available on the Barnes & Noble Nook Reader, as well as in paperback if you want it in paperback. And we're going to donate 100% of all profits from the sale of that book, at least to the end of this year, and probably continue, like I said, again next year. And we'll give some of the proceeds to COPE as well. So go check it out. And I hope you learned a little something, because I know I did. And if you ever visit Laos and find yourself in Vientiane, highly recommend that you go check this place out as well, as it's a wonderful education for a very, very tragic part of history in Southeast Asia.
Okay, thanks a lot for watching. I really hope that you learned something from this video. I know I learned a lot. For anyone that goes to Laos or Vientiane, I highly recommend that you visit this rehabilitation center, as they're doing wonderful things. I hope you give them financial support. And we will start actually even pledging some of the money that we make, although it's not been a lot, but the small amount of money that we do get for selling my book, The Golden Gift, which I'll put the link below. We will start donating some proceeds to COPE as well. Okay, thanks for watching. As always, stay intensely curious. So long.